SEGA is a multi-juggernaut of a company. With so many IPs under their belt, it makes me wonder why they haven't done a crossover yet. Yeah, there's a sports game, the racing game, and the JRPG, but what they have not yet done is a fighting game.
Theoretically, I am mainly using Smash Bros. As a comparison, since that's a game that essentially invented the crossover of different franchises. Since Sonic and Bayonetta are already in Smash Bros., it got me wondering, what would happen if SEGA created their own Smash Bros?
The purpose of this video is to showcase the potential character roster of what a SEGA fighting game would essentially look like, but I also want to showcase some of the importance of these characters and how they are integral to SEGA's representation. I will also organize them to represent each Smash Bros. Iteration. I don't think it would make complete sense to spread your roster so big on the first go, so let's just give SEGA 3 different games. The first game will consist of 12 characters, 4 of them being unlockable. The second game will have 26 characters in total, including the original 12. And the third game will have 40 characters in total. If it isn't clear, I chose these numbers to represent the amount of playable characters in each Smash game, with the exception of Super Smash Bros. Brawl, which has 39 playable characters. A weird number, so I decided to just add 1 just to make it look more even. And with that in mind, let's dive into SEGA's first Smash Bros. The obvious answer for our first pick would have to be Sonic the Hedgehog. After all, he is the mascot of the company, so it makes perfect sense to include him as our first playable character. For the second, I decided to pick Axel Stone from the Streets of Rage series. Streets of Rage was relatively a popular beat-em-up game back in the day, and, well, Streets of Rage is all about punching and beating up bad guys, so it would fit very well. For our next representative, I had a hard time picking a character from the Phantasy Star series. I have no memory of ever playing this game, and the closest knowledge I have about the series is the massive GameCube controller with the keyboard in the middle. That just looks like cancer. So to make things more easy for me, I decided to pick the first playable character and the main protagonist of the first game, Alice. She has a sword, so picking up a moveset wouldn't be too hard. Gilius Thunderhead from the Golden Axe series, another well-known beat-em-up game back in the day, and a very well-known and distinct character such as Gilius should have no issue blending in within SEGA's universe. I imagine him to be somewhat of a short stature, which leads to a smaller hitbox, but that shouldn't mean your opponent should think less of him. He has an Axe of Fury and can conjure up lightning spells. He would rock as a playable character. This game is as unique as you can get it. Ai from Super Monkey Ball would be awesome as a fighter. I would be curious as to how a character like him would fight if he were to be forever trapped inside a ball, but I'm sure that would bring in an interesting tone for his animation. Ai is also at the very least the second face of SEGA in terms of the majority of SEGA crossover titles, so he would fit in perfectly as a fighter.
Jet Set Radio!
Jet Set Radio, ah yes, the game that popularized cel-shaded graphics. If there's a character that can represent the Jet Set Radio series, it has to be the leader of the GGs, Beat. He could be a fast and nimble character who uses his Garfitti as a flamethrower-like projectile, all the while looking stylish with his dance moves and skating abilities. And speaking of dancing, we can't forget about the popping Ulala from Space Channel 5. With a trusty beam gun, she can flow the battle with her rhythmic dancing. Aside from that, she can chew and charge up her chew lasers for even more damage and combos. What's a fighting game without an actual fighting game being represented? Akira from the Virtua Fighter series can't be more of an obvious choice. This does beg the question of what other characters can be represented for future iterations if they want to add more Virtua Fighter characters. But since Akira is the mascot of the Virtua Fighter series, I believe he deserves a spot as an OG Sega Smash veteran.
And now we get into the unlockable characters. Now, with these next 4 fighters, I decided to pick them mainly for their impact, their shock value, or their overall importance to Sega's history. Looking back at Smash Bros. For 64, the 4 characters you unlock are characters you might have never heard of. I'm going with the same ideology with these next 4 characters, starting with
Alex Kidd, the original mascot for Sega up until the big blue blur himself dethroned him. As obscure as he may be, you have to admit his importance within Sega history. Never really played any of his games, so I'm not exactly sure what his attacks may be, but having him as a fighter would certainly remind us of Sega's origins. House of the Dead. God, this was my jam as a kid. This was essentially the go-to shooting arcade game back in the day. Either that or Time Crisis, but Time Crisis is not owned by Sega, so we'll just ignore it for now. At our 10th spot for a playable character, we have James from House of the Dead 2. It was a toss-up between him and Thomas from the first House of the Dead, and I will admit, either one would have fit in fine, but I like James more, so I went with him. And there's another reason why I picked him over Thomas, which we will get back to later on. But for now, he can easily shoot guns and lure zombies within the battlefield. The idea mostly came from how Frank West plays in Marvel vs. Capcom, but more action rather than cartoony. For our third unlockable character, we have Honey, also known as Candy, from Fighting Vipers. Well, would you look at that, another fighting game. Her moveset would obviously be similar to how she fights with her fist, her feet, and her bump attacks. Interestingly enough, she's also a secret playable character in Sonic the Fighters, so it's as if she has some sort of presence within Sega's franchises before. And finally, for our last unlockable character, we have none other than the underrated Knights from Nights into Dreams. The game has a huge cult following, and while the general public, including myself, has no idea who this character is, I think it's time for Knights to make a resurgence onto Sega's radar, and what better way to do that than to have Knights represented in this fictitious fighting game. I imagine Knights would have one of the best recoveries in the game due to the flying ability very much present within the game, but I also imagine having a similar variety of homing and spinning attacks, much like Sonic. I don't want it to be a complete clone character, however. There's definitely some room for creativity here.
Those are the 12 characters I believe perfectly encapsulate Sega's past, but what happens if this game becomes successful and spawns another sequel, say Sega Smash Bros. Melee or Sega Smash Bros. 2, whatever you want to call it?
It wouldn't make any sense for Sonic to be the only character to represent his franchise, so let's add in Tails just to fill it in. He was of course the second character to be introduced in the sequel, Sonic 2, and he's the best friend of Sonic throughout each iteration. I think it makes sense for Tails to get a spot, and I imagine him to be either somewhat of a semi-clone of Sonic with a bigger recovery, or he could also pilot a mech, similar to Sonic Adventure 2. I would be perfectly fine with either option, or a combination of both. And while we're at it with the Sonic franchise, I think Knuckles deserves a spot as well. He appeared in the third game, Sonic 3 and Knuckles, and due to his bulkier limitations compared to Sonic and Tails, he too wouldn't be a complete clone character. He would be a lot more aggressive with his punch attacks, would have the ability to wall climb, do a dig attack, and a glide, plus not having Knuckles within the trio of Sonic characters would just feel really weird, so I think Knuckles has an importance as a Sonic representative as much as Tails does. Okay, I have no idea how the hell a representative of Crazy Taxi would work on the battlefield, but I honestly believe Crazy Taxi should have some sort of representation in the Sega All-Star game. I mainly picked BD Joe as he appeared in the first game by default, and he appears on other Sonic and All-Star games as well. Again, the only thing I'm having trouble coming up with is a moveset for BD Joe. Would he use his taxi on the battlefield, or would he fight on foot? I don't have the full answer, but I definitely do want to see him appear in some sort of fashion. And here we go, our first true clone character. We have Gum from Jet Set Radio. I say clone because really all the Jet Set Radio characters don't really differ too much in terms of playstyle aside from ammunition and speed. I'd like to think Gum would play more like a faster but weaker version of Beat, similar to her stats compared to him in both Jet Set Radio games. Ryo from Shenmue, another cult classic from Sega. If Sega wants to promote their upcoming game Shenmue 3, you gotta have Ryo. He can fight using his fists and martial arts, and I imagine his final smash or his ultimate attack would be a forklift that he uses in the driving games. I don't know, I think that'll look pretty funny. With Sega having recently purchased the rights to all of Atlus's IPs, I think it makes sense to have a Persona representative. So we gotta have Yu Narukami, however Makoto Yuki, Aya Amano, and Tatsuya Suo are at least honorable mentions. I mainly chose Yu Narukami since Persona 4 is the most popular Persona game before Persona 5's release, and he is the only main character to have a fighting game role in Persona 4 Arena and Arena Ultimax, aside from maybe Aegis with her being a main character in Persona 3 FES. But she's also a secondary character in Persona 3, but whatever. Yu is simple and clean, and he can kill with his katana and he's a Nagi persona. As an essential Atlus mascot, Yu would fit in nicely with the world of Sega All-Stars. Next, we have Alicia from Valkyria Chronicles. Now, I have not played any of the Valkyria Chronicle games aside from the first one, but she was the first character you see and recruit in the first game, so I went with her. I know Welkin is technically the main character and the character you essentially control for the majority of the chapters, but he's in a tank for the majority of them, and the last thing I need is another character with a vehicle fighting. Besides, I think Welkin would fit in more as a Final Smash type of special move instead, similar to Landmaster, only with less barrel rolls and flight. Other than that, Alicia is an infantry unit who can shoot and throw grenades, so she could play similarly to Snake from Smash Bros. Brawl or Nathan Drake from PlayStation All-Stars. Of course, how can I forget the Vocaloid mascot Hatsune Miku? You want a character that could rival Sonic the Hedgehog in popularity, at least in Japan? Look no further than a blue-haired twin-tailed princess herself. She can fight with a variety of musical instruments, a guitar, drumstick, mic stand, and while at the same time, she can also use her voice to either invigorate or offend upcoming opponents. Her fighting moves can also borrow a little bit of Ulala, but I want her dancing to be a little more unique, so instead of space pop, we have J-pop. She may also use a variety of different personality traits to enhance her ability, whether or not she's going to be the kind-hearted best friend or a f***ed up yandere. And for our last default character, obviously I can't forget about the witch you can't mess with, Bayonetta. She's got guns on 4 limbs, witch time, and a variety of different Umbran attacks within her disposal, and she's a radio playable character in Smash Bros. She'll fit right in with a cast of SEGA characters.
Now with Melee's unlockable characters, it's a lot more controversial. While you could say that characters like Mr. Game & Watch, Marth, and Mewtwo were perfect additions for Smash Bros. Melee, the majority of unlockable characters are clone characters. I try my best not to include too many, but just so you know, some of them do exist. Like...
Shadow the Hedgehog. Pretty much sums it up right there. He would play pretty much exactly like Sonic with a different running animation. Otherwise, if you want him to be a unique fighter, we're gonna have to give him a gun. And the last thing I want from any SEGA mascot brawler is the reminder that Shadow the Hedgehog existed.
SEGA TheSanshiro, SEGA TheSanshiro, SEGA TheSanshiro.
SEGA TheSanshiro will be quite a surprising character to unlock, don't you think? This obscure man hailing from the good old Neo Japan will beat the ever-loving crap out of you, unless you buy a SEGA Saturn. I don't know much about his moveset, but to take a lazy route, he will play more or less similar to Akira from Virtua Fighting, with his final smash being shooting a rocket into space. Now I know he's not from the same universe as Akira. My guess is he would be the Ganondorf of the game, someone who deserves a more original moveset in later games, but for now is another asset of Akira. Here we have another representative of Space Channel 5. It's Pudding! I don't know much about this game, but she looks like Ulala, dances like Ulala, so let's make her a clone of Ulala. And this is the reason why I chose James over Thomas. This is Gary, James' partner in crime and brother. He would pretty much be an exact clone of James.
Those are the 4 unlockable characters that are more or less clones or echo fighters of an existing character. And arguably, yes, I could have also included Gum as an unlockable character as well, but I believe Jet Set Radio deserves representation without the need to unlock another character. This next character, on the other hand, I've saved for last because I believe he will make the most unique moveset out of everyone, and he is gonna be very silly in the combat field.
Billy Hatcher and the Chint Egg? No, that don't look right. I can't think of a more obscure and weird character deserving of the spot other than Billy Hatcher. Him and his egg would do wondrously in the battlefield. The possibilities are endless. Not only can he attack, but his egg can also act as a second shield in a way. It can be used as a homing attack, and assuming you or your opponent don't break it, it can get bigger the more you roll with it.
Oh boy, so we're on to our 3rd SEGA Smash Bros. Games, and with this one I decided to go for really more IPs in SEGA's library, although you will be seeing some familiar faces from previous franchises that we've mentioned before. Furthermore, the list of clone characters have diminished in Brawl, so I decided to go for characters with more of a distinguishable identity. That way you can see that they are their own characters rather than a clone of another one.
And our first new character for our 3rd SEGA All-Star game is Samba from Samba de Amigo. I imagine his maracas will be used as his main weapon, either as close-range attacks or projectiles. Speaking of which, music notes can easily be utilized as personified attacks as well. Aside from that, his dancing can also be used for fighting animations too. I may not know anything about Burning Rangers, but what I do know is that this song is groovy. I'm a Bane. Oh my god, that sounds like a Batman villain with a southern accent. Sho Amabane, the new recruit for the Burning Rangers and the first main character of the game, will be taking the spotlight as a playable character. He'll do what any firefighter would do in a fiery situation, hose down everything. Of course, he would also utilize his other piece of artillery to fight against his foes, like his mecha-suited jet boosters. Skies of Arcadia, one of the long-forgotten SEGA properties with a fantastic game behind it. If there's anyone that deserves a spot, it's easily Vice. This guy's moveset is pretty self-explanatory. He's a sky pirate with 2 swords, so let's do what a sky pirate does and stabby stabby stab the enemies. Yakuza seems to be SEGA's mainstay game that's recently gaining traction, so it would make perfect sense that the main character Kazuma would get a starring role in the game. What else does a member of the Yakuza do except punch, kick, and beat the ever-loving crap out of everything? Although if they do add him, I want them to add some sort of silliness to his moveset. Since Yakuza games are more comedy than your average sandbox game, I think something along the lines of singing karaoke would be a perfect Final Smash. Here we have Hyper Dimension Neptunia. God, I hate this game! But setting my personal bias aside, this game is clearly popular among a lot of Neptunia fans with its multiple continuous spin-offs, its sequels, and prequels, and anime series. My goodness, I don't think even Call of Duty whores itself more than Hyper Dimension Neptunia. Anyways, here we have Neptune. Well, no duh, it's in the title of the series. Based on the unreleased Sega Neptune, Neptune would fit in quite well as another anime-esque type of fighter. Speaking of Forgotten Gems, I don't think anyone I know has ever heard of the Conduit series. It was a first-person Metroidvania type of shooter for the Wii, and in a way it was a pseudo-replacement for the Metroid series when it was on life support with Other M. This character might not deserve the spot objectively, but I personally love this game, and I think it would bring a lot more diversity within Sega's cast by including Michael Ford. A realistic, well, as realistic as a Nintendo Wii character can get, first-person character would do intriguingly within the world of two dancing monkeys and anime.
You never see it come.
And of course, how can I forget the main character of Persona 5, Akira Kurusu? And after scripting this video, I just realized, holy crap, there's two Akiras! Hopefully that won't cause too much confusion. After all, in Smash Bros. We already got Roy, and Roy. Akira will play a lot more differently from the sword-swinging electric fighting Yu Narukami. He would be a lot more faster, but short-range with his butter knife of a weapon. But he will also have a gun, so I also imagine him being more keep-away, kind of like Fox in Melee. And for our final non-unlockable character, we have yet another underrated gem. Rhythm Thief was a fun rhythm game for the Nintendo 3DS, and much like Michael Ford, I'm going to put Raphael on the roster. We've got Ulala and Hatsune Miku as our obligatory dancer fighter, so why not expand the roster a little bit? Ulala is a lot more Space Jam, and Hatsune Miku is more J-pop, so Raphael's dancing would be a lot more jazz-like. Moving more smoothly and filled with swag, there's no other cooler character than Raphael.
Okay guys, hear me out. Football.
Let's add in the Football Manager from Football Manager. Why? Well, just imagine it. You start playing the game and then you get one of those warning, challenger approaching screens. You don't know who it is because it looks like an obscure silhouette of an ordinary man. Then you start fighting. Football Manager. Who the f*** is this guy? Yeah, I'm only adding him just for the shock value, but believe it or not, this series is actually pretty popular among sports fans. I have no idea what his moveset will be, but I'll let Sega be a lot more creative with the process. Never played any of the Sakura Wars games, the only thing I know about her is that she's in Project X Zone, but her design just perfectly captures a good character. She's also an old character too, dating back to the Sega Saturn era, so why not bring her another nostalgic throwback? She's basically a sword wielder, so let's just have her swing around her katana blade around and you got yourself a waifu to remember. Ah yeah, you gotta have Jack the motherfucking ripping body limbs into the game. Of course, the violence would have to be toned down if Sega wants to slap that T-rating onto the box, but I don't see him being too censored if they're allowing Bayonetta to be faithful. He'll have a lot of boxing or wrestling moves, making him more of a tough brawler. I'm not entirely too sure about his black and white aesthetic either, so I imagine Sega would use his Anarchy Reigns model, while having his monochrome design as an alternate costume instead. Selvaria from Valkyria Chronicles, who, by the time I scripted this video, is actually the only villain I added in this game. Holy crap, she got more spotlight than Dr. Eggman, apparently. Huh. I actually forgot about him. Sorry. I imagine her to play similarly to how she appeared in Fighting Climax, with the ability to use her Lancer gun as a slow RPG-like projectile that does massive damage. Maybe they could work individually as one character, and have the other character as an alternate costume similar to Robin and Corrin, but I'm gonna go the extra mile and say that the Kagaman twins would play similar to Ice Climbers. You control one character with various attacks, and the other character will follow up whether of a delay frame window like Nana, or at a certain tempo similar to their music motif. And finally, we have Vincent from Catherine. He'll fight in his undies, moving and pushing blocks to certain edges, using his pillow as either a projectile or his main weapon, maybe even use his boost string to give him a speed boost. I imagine him to be a rather weak character on the ground, but strong in the air, sort of like a combination of Jigglypuff's mobility and Little Mac's character model. There's a lot of creativity for Vincent, so anything he does can fit in within his fighting style.
And there we have it, the definitive SEGA and All-Star Smash Bros. Now, obviously, this could easily be improved. For example, I probably could have added more villain characters. I probably could have added more recent IP characters rather than nostalgic ones. I could have added more of the serious type of characters rather than the anime-esque ones. And maybe I could have also expanded more of the existing IPs that SEGA already has made, rather than just adding more new IPs into the game. I more or less wanted to make more of a theoretical possibility rather than a definitive list. There's a reason why I limited my character selection to only 40 characters, since if I added any more, well, I could just easily add the entirety of SEGA's franchises. I mostly picked the characters that I believe are the popular choices, along with my, of course, personal bias as well. However, I am curious as to what you guys think about the list. Is there any characters that you want either added or removed? Or is there some sort of characters that you want to fix around a little bit, or you think there's more of a priority of this certain character versus this certain character? With that being said, thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope you guys enjoy it, and if you guys do, feel free to leave a like down below. If there's any way I could improve this list of a fictitious SEGA All-Star fighting game by either having characters removed or added, then definitely feel free to put your comments and feedbacks down in the comment section. Also, if there's any way I could improve the format of this video too, then I would love to see your feedback as well. With that being said, I am TheBassSinger through and through. Thank you guys so much for watching. This is TheBassSinger signing out. I'll see you next time.